Welcome back to Africa 24 English. It is a pleasure to have you back with us. Today for this special edition of the interview, we are joined by Mr. Yemi Kale, Group Chief Economist at Afreximbank, and together we will look at the 2024 edition of the African Trade Report. Mr. Kale, welcome to Africa 24 English.
Thank you for having me.
So since you're at home, let's go into the matter. The 2024 edition of the African Trade Report published by Afreximbank shows that the global output expanded by 3.2% in 2023. We saw a decline of about 0.3% in 2022. Could you please go further into the details of that report?
Well, yes, thank you very much. I think, as you are aware, the global economy, which includes the African environment, has been having challenges since the 2019 COVID pandemic, and the global economy has been trying to recover completely since then. Over the years, things have generally been improving for the continent. What we are seeing in 2020, what we expect for 2024, is that it's going to be stronger than it was in 2023, based on so many different factors. For example, our traditional markets in Europe, the US, China, they are doing generally better than expected. Domestically, output is increasing. We are seeing that most of the impacts of the geopolitical tension, they are still there, are easing. So in general, we are looking at most macroeconomic indicators seem to be improving compared to what they were doing before. Now, we're not saying that means all the challenges are over, but what we see is the stronger growth than in previous years. It's moving back it's moving back to pre-COVID times in terms of performance, and that's what we are seeing. That's why we're encouraged by our outlook.
Then, what does it say about trade between Africa and the Caribbean? Well,
in terms of Africa and trade between Africa and the Caribbean is still very small. It's about 1%, and again, the same reason why trade within Africa is low, even though it has been improving. It's even increased when global trade went down. It essentially it's very low, and the reason it's very low is because the relationship between the two regions has not been as strong, and that's one of the reasons why we're trying to have a lot more conversations. Why the meeting was also here in the Bahamas. There's huge potential for stronger growth between Africa and the Caribbean regions, but the information has not really been there. So African countries do not know the types of, they don't really know the types of goods that are produced in the Caribbean and vice versa. They don't really understand the ways they can connect together to ensure that they trade more effectively. But by having these conversations, if you listen to a lot of the conversations in the annual meetings, most of the commendation to the president of the bank was for creating that platform where we can talk to each other, we can understand what each other needs. Now people are realizing the potential that exists in both regions. They are committing to various investments in both regions. Once that conversation has started, once the information of the potential and the opportunities in both the Africa and Caribbean regions increases and people are aware, then you will now start seeing that the share of growth of trade between those two countries will start to improve. So the conversation has started, but currently it's still at a very low level. But I think we are optimistic that based on the conversation we're having, speaking to the prime minister of different CARICOM countries, different African countries, if you listen to some of the conversation, a lot of business leaders that are here are excited because they're now realizing the huge opportunities for both countries to partner.
Since Africa and the Caribbean countries are still struggling to trade with each other at the regional level, what were the stakes of these 2022 annual meetings of Afreximbank for both regions?
That's exactly what I said, that by creating that conversation where we can understand how both our regions function, by creating that networking opportunity where policymakers, business leaders from both sides can meet, discuss, understand what happens in both their economies and regions, that increases those opportunities. And that's exactly what this meeting has, one of the main objectives and benefits of this meeting to both regions.
All right. In 2022, the International Trade Center published a report identifying over $1 billion in export potential between Africa and the Caribbean, indicating that by channeling investment into growth areas, Africa could increase its merchandise exports to the Caribbean by 54% in 2026. What do you see as priority sectors where investment is needed?
One is tourism. I think everybody knows the Caribbean Caribbean region as big on tourism, but in Africa as well, there are significant tourism locations. Also, agriculture. Agriculture is also going to be a big, creates a huge opportunity for the two countries to trade. We tend to have the same we have the same opportunity in terms of arable land and so on. And agriculture is a large proportion of our economy, so there's an opportunity in agriculture as well. And then building materials, infrastructure, that's also huge because both regions have huge infrastructure deficits. Mr. Aliko Dangote, for example, was talking about how in the near future is going to make it available for cement to come into the Caribbean region at affordable prices and so on. So the opportunity, because of the demand for these goods and services between those two regions, like I said, agriculture, building materials, tourism, I think those are probably the key sectors that both regions can benefit from increased trade and exports.
Well, ACTIV was established in 2021 as a key strategic activity to institutionalize cooperation between the private sectors of the Caribbean and Africa. What major advances have been made since then?
I think the fact that the ACTIV creates a platform to solve that problem that I mentioned earlier, to connect these regions together, and that's exactly what it has done. It's improving, it's sharing of cultural exchange. There is connecting different businesses and policymakers together, which is extremely important. That gap in information between those two regions, like I said, is one of the major challenges, and it's one of the things that ACTIV has helped to bridge. Also providing financial, technical expertise, helping businesses on both sides from both regions to understand how things are done in each of those regions. So they are providing technical assistance. When necessary, they are providing financial assistance. They're helping in terms of connecting businesses and policymakers. I think it has done tremendously well as far as that's concerned.
That's good news. Now let's come back to Africa and let's share these figures. According to experts, Africa, comprising 17% of the world's population, commands just 4% of global GDP and a mere 2% of world manufacturing output. In your opinion, what can be done to change that figure? I
think that's part of what the trade report emphasized. Most people, if not all, agree that the way to grow Africa faster, to increase African trade, to industrialize faster, is increasing intra-African trade and intra-African Caribbean trade. Once we start to trade with ourselves in the continent and with the Caribbean region, we are less vulnerable to shocks that happen in the global stage, and that you can see that the report stated that even though global trade reduced, even though overall African trade reduced, intra-African trade actually went up. So it means that despite what was going on in the globe and the challenges they were having, we could trade with ourselves. So the problem was not challenging the region. It was because our main traditional markets were struggling, and because we are dependent on them, on those markets, whatever happens to them has to affect us. So again, trading more with the continent, investing more in the continent, speaking more to ourselves. I think we are beginning to understand that a lot of that has come out in the meetings, that Africa, and that's the whole point of global Africa, will be fixed by Africans. It has come out very clearly since COVID that when the chips are down, these traditional markets, traditional partners will pull back, they'll pull their resources, they'll pull their investments, and we'll be in a mess. But if we partner more with ourselves, we talk more with ourselves, we do business more with ourselves, that's the best way to hedge against such crises and the best way to develop. You're owning your destiny. That's the theme of you are taking the development of your countries in your hands, and you are dealing with people that have similar values, similar stories, similar cultures, and that's one of the best ways to grow and develop and improve that share and that growth that you're talking about.
Now, to make intra-African trade a reality, what is the bold step that should be taken, in your opinion? I
think there are three obstacles that is limiting. At least three obstacles. There are more than that, but the three key ones that come to one. Again, I go back to information. a business in Cameroon that has a Cameroonian business might have I don't know, cocoa to sell, but he is only aware of European markets he can sell them. Doesn't realize that there's a demand for it in Algeria, for example, because that information doesn't exist. So he'll take it all the way to somewhere in Europe to sell. Now, when you bridge that information gap, where as a continent there's enough information that this is what every country in the continent produces, this is what they sell, this is what they need. It's easy to connect. I want to sell my gold, and I realize that there's a gold refinery in Zambia, for example, or Zimbabwe. Then rather than looking for somebody in America or China to sell that gold to, I can sell you someone next door, which they can use to build their own economy. Once that information exists, it increases the amount of transactions that can come out from trade. The second one I would say is the infrastructure network. Sometimes it's easier to transport my goods to China than to send it 2 countries down, because the transportation infrastructure does not exist. So if African countries or Caribbean countries create that connectivity where they can move their goods easily across the continent, across the regions, then again you get a lot more activity going on. The third is also payment systems. Part of one of the things that Afreximbank has done. If in Nigeria I want to buy I don't know, some cocoa from Ghana, I have to first look for dollars, if I can get the dollars, and then convert it before I can buy in Cameroon. Now we have a payment system where in Nigeria I can sit down and then sell to somebody else and buy cocoa in Ghana, and then he gets CDs and I send him Naira and he gets CDs. Again, it speeds up the transaction, and then once the speed of transaction increased, then you start having a lot more activity. I don't have to look for dollars, struggle to find dollars, have to borrow money from different lenders because I need to get the dollars just so that I can sell to a country that is a few miles away. Once you create that system where financial transactions can be done a lot faster within a continent, that would also speed the pace of intra-African trade.
How is Afreximbank participating in that process of making intra-African trade a reality?
That's exactly our mandate. We provide facilities to improve the infrastructure which I mentioned. We have something called Trade. That is a trade intelligence system that provides that information. That information I'm talking about that is needed for people to understand what. So we'll do that as well. And we also have PAPS, which is actually also helping to fast track that payment system. So what we did was we tried to do a study to understand exactly the question he asked: what is limiting the pace of intra-African trade? And then when we found all this, when we found that these were all the bottlenecks, we now started creating products to fix that. But that's actually our entire mandate, is to improve intra-African trade, and that's exactly what we do. So you see, all our products are targeted towards that.
So we can say that very soon, will we all be able to travel across Africa without needing a visa or without any barriers?
Those conversations we are having those conversations. It's a gradual process. Like I said, you can see the numbers in intra-African trade is improving. In some countries, they still need to amend laws here and there. But if you listen to the conversation, you see that we're all on the same page now. We seem to be speaking. We seem to be agreeing that this is the way to go. It's a gradual process, but again, the conversation has started. There are certain decisions that have already been taken in areas. It's a gradual process. We are trying to reverse hundreds of years of colonial legacy that has taught us to work in a particular way, which was actually to work against ourselves. And now we are realizing, no, it's actually better to speak to ourselves, talk to ourselves. We are similar countries, and the only way we're going to develop is if we interact more with ourselves and try to solve the challenges that are in the continent together.
That's some good news. Thank you very much, Mr. Kale, for answering our English questions. Ladies and gents, here comes the end of this interview, but stay tuned to our programs.